Good morning. I'm going to tell you about Frances Glessner Lee, the mother of forensic science. She isn't who we typically think of as a scientist today. She didn't run experiments or even go to college. However, her contribution to the field of forensic science pushed it to where it is today, and I'd love to tell you about her. But before we get to Lee, I do want to tell you a little bit about what forensic sciences looked like in the early 1900s. When we think of forensics today, we might think of DNA analysis, fingerprints, and maybe even high tech machines. In the 1900s, though, this was far from the truth, especially in America. In the US, forensic science was a brand new field. Back then, medical examiners did not have a background in medicine and would often guess, and the police were not trained on how to handle evidence. At this time in France, Edmond Lecard was a pioneer forensic scientist, and he's often referred to as the father of forensic science. He founded many famous principles today, including the Lecard exchange principle. The first forensics lab in the US didn't open until 1924, and before this, the main evidence that was used in courts was eyewitness statements, which with recent research is shown to often be unreliable and incorrect. In the 1900s, it's estimated that 20 to 25% of sentencings were wrongful convictions, though this statistic is only an estimate due to records not being kept until more recent years. Frances Glessner Lee was born in Chicago on March 25, 1878, to a wealthy family. Lee and her brother were taught at home by a private tutor, and as she got older, she wished to study medicine, though her father would never allow her to go to school. She would recall later in her biography that he always told her that a lady doesn't go to school, though her brother would later study medicine at Harvard School of Medicine. At 19, Lee married a lawyer and had 3 children with him, and after her divorce in the 1930s, she would obtain her family's fortune. On a vacation, Lee would meet her brother's classmate George McGrath, who introduced her to forensic medicine, and her passion for the field would start. At the time, however, forensics was a small, misunderstood field, and she wanted to see change. The only issue was that it was unheard of for a woman to be involved in forensic science. Since she couldn't be involved directly in the forensic process, she decided to start making changes to the way forensics experts were educated. In 1931, Lee donated $250,000 to create the country's first Department of Legal Medicine at Harvard with George McGrath as chair. Today, this equals about 3.4 million US dollars. Along with this, she also successfully lobbied to have coroners replaced with medical professionals, thereby professionalizing the field of forensic pathology for the first time. She still wanted to further change the way forensics experts were trained on how to properly handle and analyze crime scenes. Though she was not formally educated, she did know how to make dollhouses, as this was quite a popular hobby for wealthy women at the time. Throughout the 1930s and 40s, Lee used actual police cases and reconstructed crime scenes in miniature models. She focused the scenes on what she called invisible victims. The cases she worked with often were about women, the poor, and people whose cases might be overlooked or tainted with prejudice on part of the investigators. The 20 dollhouses she created were titled The Nutshell Studies of Unexplained Death. They were all fully handmade and incredibly detailed, as they were meant to challenge trainees' powers of observation and deduction. It's amazing to see the detail that was put into them, including hand-sewn curtains, fully written miniature letters, and much, much more. But if you're curious and want to look them up, I will give you a quick warning that they are very gruesome. By 1945, she began working with the New Hampshire police and was eventually made into the first female police captain in the country. Lee passed away in 1962 at the age of 84. The nutshells were so effective that 18 out of the 20 are still used in training seminars today at the office of the chief medical examiner in Baltimore. Through her efforts of furthering the field of forensic science, along with many others' efforts, wrongful convictions today is at about 5%, with some variation depending on the type of crime. An amazing group of people that is continually working on bringing that even further down, as well as proving the innocence of the wrongfully convicted, is the Innocence Project, who I highly recommend you check out if that's interesting to you. Over the years, the field of forensics has opened more to women and is overall a much larger branch and is actually female dominated today. Lee took a skill that was considered a woman's work and used it to change a male dominated field to help many people. Though Lee isn't exactly what we might think of when we say scientist, she was a large player in the effort to push the field to where it is today. And for that, I highly respect her, and she will always be a motivating factor to me. Thank you, and happy early Halloween.